Hello everybody, my name is Shoelace and welcome to another edition of free-to-play reviews. This time we got Paragon, a new-ish MOBA made from the same people who made Unreal Tournament. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So this section's probably going to be relatively small. Currently the game is a third-person MOBA completely devoid of any substantial lore, where you spend some time in competing in 5v5 matches in order to level up your character and further upgrade and build a card deck that you use to upgrade your character in-game. Although keep in mind that this game is pretty early on in development, so lore will be coming out for this game that further develops the characters. As far as I know, there are just 3 interesting facts towards each character that you can display in-game into each of the characters' profile. But other than that, not very much substantial lore for you to really delve your teeth into. After you have spent your time selecting one of the 20 characters that are currently available for this game, you then select a deck, which is either something that you have custom built yourself or something the game has preemptively made for you so that you could better enjoy the experience. For this instance, I'm using a custom deck, which is awful because I have no idea what I'm doing basically in this footage, but it does present a pretty interesting system that they have here. Essentially, it clears up a lot of the store page by making it contain only the items that you have hand-picked for your certain build. So for this example, I was playing Murdoch and I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to do a lot of life draining with all my attacks. So I hand-selected a bunch of items that specifically drain life force with each of Murdoch's attacks. Now, this is really bad for Murdoch. It's not a build that works really well for him, but it is one that is possible due to my hand-selected build and currently unlocked items. It is important, however, that you do remember that this is a double-edged sword for this certain system. For example, this life drain system that I have going on for Murdoch here, really bad, not really working for me. However, I have to continue going through this 40-minute match with this life drain card deck. I can't switch it out halfway through the match, which is slightly unfortunate, which makes me recommend all new players basically only just use a card deck if it's proof tested, if you know that it's going to work, because if you're just experimenting, then you're going to be a pain in the ass for your team, and for yourself, it's not going to be a fun experience if you're going to be dying over and over again. Speaking of dying, let's talk about combat here quickly. Combat feels pretty satisfying in this game. It's pretty impacty, very vulgar with the way that each one of your attacks hits, depending on the build that you go through. I've tried a few of the characters. I haven't tried all of them yet, mind you, but I have tried a good portion of them. From what I could tell, they all have a very unique status to them. They all seem to have their own little thing going for them. They all feel pretty different, minus the basic attack, which across all characters is pretty much the same. Basically, all the characters are split up into separate categories. The fighter being the hitty, smacky kind of guy in melee combat. The ranger, which is a gun shooting kind of guy. And a caster, which basically just throws spells at the other people. Which is pretty similar towards the ranger, but that's enough of that. I feel like there's not that much of a difference there. They definitely do feel separated in their own regards when it comes to abilities, but I was kind of hoping that maybe the basic attack would separate these characters a little bit more than, hey, Murdoch has a gun and one of them has a bow and arrow. That's the difference between their basic attack. I was kind of hoping for something a little bit different. But then again, it is just a MOBA, so what am I talking about here? Another issue that I have with this game's combat system is one that I have with basically every MOBA, which is just the snowball effect that you get from allied players feeding towards the enemy, which causes this huge imbalance towards combat, which makes it a little bit ridiculous to be playing, but obviously that's something that I can't really fix in this genre. That's just a personal snippet of mine. One system that I am unfamiliar with when it comes to the MOBA genre is this harvester system, which seems to be this jungle-oriented pressure plate that you can stand on in order for your team to slowly gather more currency over a period of time, which I think is a pretty interesting system. It has an element of jungle control to the game, which adds a little bit more relevance to the jungle towards most MOBAs. I tend to ignore it in a lot of games. Then again, I'm not exactly a professional player, so I don't really see all the advantages of being a jungler, but I guess it adds a little bit more allure to me than it did originally for other MOBAs. So in that case, I think it was definitely a good idea to add that. I feel like that extends a little bit further into one of the main advantages that this game has, which is the map itself is very, very different from other MOBAs that I've seen in the genre. It's very vertical. There's a lot of vertical movement that you have towards this game. It really puts an emphasis on high ground and positioning over a lot of other MOBAs, which seems to be a pretty fairly straightforward. These are the paths you can travel forward, backwards, left, and right. But in this, you can go up, you can go down. There's a lot of dropping around and movement in order to be needed. And because of the way that the third person shooting actually works in this game, you actually have to aim for a lot of your opponents, which may be high up, maybe low down, maybe moving, and you have to compensate for distance and all that sort of thing, which makes combat feel a little bit more participatory than it would in other MOBAs, which is definitely a huge advantage that this game has over a lot of the others in the genre. I'm definitely a big fan of the way that moving around the map feels and how it is to get from one point to another. And it's also pretty fun being some of the characters with more present movement abilities, which allow them to teleport and double jump over barriers that can't be accessed by other characters, which is pretty interesting. So, on the whole, gameplay in this game, pretty good. It's definitely worth your time and effort to try and master it, and it's definitely a fun time to be sure. Paragon's graphical settings are pretty impressive by my standards. They have 3D resolution, frame rate limits, view distance, effects, lighting, textures, post-processing, and anti-aliasing that can be all turned on and off. It's also pretty helpful that it's able to tell you what display adapter is actually being used, as well as being able to choose between regular, full screen, and borderless window mode. And the hugest advantage that this has is that it can all be updated in-game without needing resets in order to have the changes applied, which is a huge advantage for this game, and I really hope that games in the future have this sort of option. How much grind does Paragon have? Well, as it turns out, pretty little in comparison to a lot of other MOBAs. Because unlike some MOBAs where you need to spend 2 or 3 hours working towards a single character that you want to try out that you may or may not enjoy, Paragon has all 20 characters just available for you from the very beginning. Now, this is subject to change, obviously. I have no idea. This has been recorded on September of 2016, so whether or not this has changed is up to anybody's debate, but currently, in the system that we have right now, you can just play everybody that is available, which is really nice. I really appreciate that they have just given everybody a chance to try out every character. Well, keep in mind that you need to get the immediate skill ranking, but that's just the game trying to teach you a tutorial. It's not necessarily keeping characters away from you from the very beginning. It's just going to let you play a few games with some easier characters before it lets you try out some of the harder ones, which makes sense, I would say. The only other allure I can think of is towards getting more cards and card packs that you get at the end of each game, as well as for successful objectives that you get outside of gameplay. These card packs are varied and randomized towards what you'll get, so it's all really dependent on how lucky you are on whether or not you're going to get all the things you want. Me, by happenstance, got a ton of life absorption stuff, which is exactly what I wanted to get, which was kind of nice. So I would say grind is really dependent on how lucky you are, which is kind of unfortunate. So I don't know, it's a pretty moderate amount of grind, but luckily you don't really need to grind in order to just play a character that may or may not fit your playstyle. So that's a big note in this game's direction. Alright, let's take a little talk about the microtransactions that are available in this game, and I'll just let footage run in the background. So in this, it seems to be very focused on skins that are available for each character, which are pretty underwhelming personally. They seem to be just simple color swaps of other skins that the game already has made out. They don't seem to be very cosmetically different. They don't seem to have any general theme that's different, other than just like one of them having a bit of a fiery effect on it. So it's a pretty underwhelming, the skins that are available currently. Masteries are available, which seems to be challenges and additional things that you can have for a character that you have a great satisfaction with and something that you really want to continue with. And you can also get card packs and general boosts, which help you progress through the game a little bit faster than everybody else. When it comes to the coins that you can purchase with in-game money, I personally think that they're a bit expensive. I feel like they could definitely use some work, especially considering if you look at Warframe, which is extremely cheap when it comes to its microtransactions. Paragon is not joking around when it costs $10 to get 1,000 coins, which barely buys you anything from what I can tell, other than a singular skin or maybe 2 items at the most. So all in all, I feel like the microtransactions in this game could be better, especially since the card packs are randomized, which aren't exactly the greatest thing in the world, all things considered. I was kind of hoping for a more set-in-stone thing, especially if somebody is going to put their actual hard-earned money down. So, you know, I would just recommend grinding through this as a free-to-play player, and if you really, really like a single character, then maybe it'd be worth putting more points into. A quick little shout out to Zay Let's Play for giving me the idea to add this section towards the free-to-play reviews. So let's talk quickly about the community. So, in order to purposely figure out exactly how toxic or untoxic this community is, what I like to do is go into a game and be the absolute worst player that I could possibly be, just to see if I can get a reaction out of people, which is obviously an awful thing for me to do, but it's for the purpose of science, so I don't feel bad about it. However, despite all odds, it seems that somebody in my game was somehow doing worse than I was when I was purposely doing bad. Didn't actually get much of a reaction out of this specific game here. People who weren't really interested in getting into the chat and getting mad at people, which is kind of nice to see, but from what I've gotten from other sources, it seems that this game is pretty much just as toxic as all of the other MOBAs I've seen. It just seems to be the nature of the MOBA. I think this is mostly due to the fact that the MOBA is a 40-minute game in which one person overfeeding can ruin an entire game for the rest of the players. So I don't really know what to say. There's not much a MOBA can do in order to improve the game's community. So if you plan on getting into this game, then I would go in expecting a bit of toxicity, but that's just the reality of the MOBA. I can't really see any MOBA fully getting past this kind of level of violent filth that you see in the chat comments of people raging and splurring nonsense at each other. It's just not right, but that's just a reality of the game. Return to the void. So far, I'm pretty damn accomplished with what Paragon has become so far. It is a very prestigious game, and I look forward to seeing what they do in the future, and I look forward to seeing more heroes coming its way. But out of my 4 rating systems, whether or not to pass it, try it, play it, or pay it, I would recommend that you only play it for now, because the microtransactions definitely not worth it at the moment. Anyways, I hope that you have all enjoyed this episode of me reviewing Paragon. Leave a comment down in the description if you have any suggestions and if you have any information that I may have glossed over or have missed in my review of this game. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, I have not been Xuul. Have an excellent day.